Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. We're really pleased to have our second webinar in the series created by Mary Graham and the Wajan team in our Wajan webinar series, Australia's Political Future, Where to from Here? And as you may recall, when you booked your ticket on Humanitics, we're posing some ponderous questions. Where are we going? What's going on with AI, climate change, the future of political extremism in this country? Where are we up to? And we're really looking forward to some thoughts and comments from two people who I deeply admire and think of as wise elders, Dr. Mary Graham and Tyson Yunkaporta. So in just a moment, we will open up for Mary and Tyson to have a yarn. Just want to let you know, we'll have about 15 minutes at the end for some questions. Obviously, we won't be able to answer everyone's, but thank you so much for joining us. This call is being recorded and we're in meeting format. So if you'd like to stay on mute, that would be really wonderful. So without further ado, I'm going to literally and figuratively spotlight Mary and Tyson so that you can see them. And good morning, Mary and Tyson. How are you today?
Yo.
Yo.
Hey,
Mary, you're on mute, love.
I have to say, yeah, Auntie is elder. I'm not. So you got elder and boy here, which is good.
Oh, don't.
Yeah, because we got that.
Thanks, Tyson.
Yeah,
Thank
that
you.
transmission, intergenerational.
Right. Sorry, are you going to say anything else, Michelle? You're right.
Well, I think we
You're
talked about this of the second two. We might focus on some thoughts about the politics of Australia or the future of our governance at a time. And I know I
yes.
speak for many people when I say now more than ever, it would be amazing to see some leadership to transform us into a relationalist system of governance so that we can care for each other and care for the other creatures. But that's just a prompt for you to be thinking about the relationalist ethos and other aspects of Indigenous governance. And Mary has frozen, so our technical issues continue. No?
It might be cool to start with that question there, where
Yes.
I sort of demarcated that generational, knowledge, status, authority, because I think not just in Australia but globally, that question is arising, and the questions and problems and challenges to gerontocracy, like really old people being in charge in a very immediate way, with that sort of instant and direct authority of decision making on behalf of everyone else, and finding directions for a future, that they may not necessarily have their finger on the pulse of. So I guess that'd be interesting to look at. Traditionally in our Indigenous cultures, what is the authority of elders and their role in decision making there, and is it and how does that decision making work in distributed governance systems like ours and like democracy is supposed to be? So that might be a good one. Well, I'm here calling in from Bunurong country, and a long way south of my homelands, Cape York, where my beautiful family and Upledge clan abides. And Arnie, where you at?
Well, I'm speaking from Southport. This is my father's people's area, Yugambeh language-speaking people, and the clan family I'm with is Merri. That's on my father's side here, I'm a saltwater person. My mother was a freshwater person, Wakka Wakka. When she was young, she was on Cherbourg, which she called Baramba. She only knew it as Baramba. That's what it used to be called. And later on, but she was under the Act. But apparently, Tyson, everybody in Queensland was under the Act. And I never realised that, actually. I always thought, well, there were apparently groups around who were like they just simply ignored it. They didn't take any notice of like the authority people and just worked where they come from, you know what I mean? And here, for us here, people, all relatives all around and so on, worked and lived from here, so belonging is really, obviously so crucially important to everybody in the world, everybody in the country. I mean, our blackfellas. But what I was thinking of in terms of the future have been always for a while now is I think Australia will not it'll be doubtful about what kind of a society, future society they'll have, or country or state, depending on how long do they continue wanting to live within a colonized state, a colonization. If they want to still, as we know, it's been going for about 1,000 years. I always time it from the time of the Crusades, you know, when the last remnants of Roman power, they weaponized Christianity. Very useful, very useful. So they can rule through that too. And they decided, well, now we own the religion, and we're the bosses of the religion, of course, with the popes and things like that. And they ordered, all we need now is the country, the Holy Land, Middle East, its proper name, Middle East, and so some old pope said, go over there and get that country and own it, you know, invade it and own it. They lost out that first time, and then colonization, as we know it, really started from then, you know, not from the Roman times, and so on and so on. Anyway, but so it's been going right up to right now, 1,000 years. So Australia has to decide, do you want to be actually modern? Do you want to actually have a real, an ordered civilizational future, proper ordered civilizational? They've got to decide whether they want to keep going with colonialism. And the key of it, of course, is how they treat us, you know? And of course, we know colonialism is the colonizer becomes colonized himself. He colonizes himself, basically. But the very fact that we can look at all kinds of proofs of this, we're still being killed, of course, you know, up to 600 now in police stations and prisons and things like that. So the old style colonial violence has come down, but it's still present in lots of ways. Plus the very fact that we don't own and run our own show. We are owners and runners of country, I always say, but we're just simply administratively, we're not running our own governance system. And that's what we should have. And if we did, that'll be well on the way for Australia, becoming truly modern, and becoming less, becoming decolonised. I think becoming decolonised is a bit frightening for them, you know, because we have to admit they're only less than 300 years old. So they don't have a metaphysical identity yet. So they don't even know that colonization is uncivilization, you know, which always gets me. I don't know. What do you reckon?
Auntie, a colony's only a colony for as long as there's an imperial motherland or fatherland, you know, that's in that extractive relation and that has that ultimate authority, you know, to veto things and to sack a prime minister if it feels like it. And so I guess we were under a very old queen for a long time, and now we're under a very old king. And we are subject to those whims.
The boss of the globe. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And we're still in that extractive relation.
And we
But
don't
then,
have
so
any
the next
leaders.
step, if we want to look at our future, I guess look at what happens with other colonies that become independent. When they achieve independence, they still, in order to retain, you know, the power structures that are benefiting the powerful within the colony, they need to somehow, as they, you know, republic, they have to sort of begin the process of recolonizing themselves under, you know, their own internal power, which is, you know, the settler colonialism stage that then happens, which you see with in the United States, for example. And I guess, you know, we can see all the nightmarish ways that has gone. Yeah, and the sort of the inherent, you know, the fragility of all their checks and balances to unwarranted power and to, you know, executive power. You know, so a republic founded on no kings. You know, unfortunately, had all they had was protocol but not really, legal structures that could stand
No,
up to, you know,
not
yeah,
privilege.
to just someone saying, no, and playground rules, yeah. And
Yeah,
once again, tying in with the theme of gerontocracy, you can get,
yeah,
um, really sort of old people whose narcissism is exacerbated by their sort of sundowning,
yeah.
and cognitive decline. Um, yeah, and they're able to sort of smash
Mm.
everything. So I guess what sort of structure would we need, and how do we build that in with the actual lives of people? Like,
Yes.
for example, the intergenerational, voices and authority.
Mm.
That's sort of coming from a consensus across generations. Yeah, and how can we look at this settler colonialism out elsewhere as republics form? And Rome that you mentioned was a republic.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can remember when I was a kid, the the referendum for Australia becoming a republic.
Mm.
But it
Yes.
was really, they did the usual thing, like with The Voice. It was like,
Mm.
okay, do you want this really shitty model of The Voice, or do you want no voice?
Yes. Yes.
So of course
Forgetting that
not.
we always had
So
a
they
vote.
could present like like a straw
Mm.
man for the thing they want the no for, and they
Mm.
did that with the referendum on Australia
Mm.
becoming a republic. They put forward like a really flawed model of
Yeah.
what a republic might look like.
Mm. Mm.
And they said you can have that or keep the constitutional monarchy.
Mm.
And sort of people who wanted a republic sort of went, well, I'm not voting for that that
Mm.
that
Mm.
straw man version. Yeah.
Mm.
And then it was like, okay, case closed. And
Mm.
I mean, that was forever ago.
Mm. Yes.
I wonder, and you don't hear a lot of a meaningful push, towards a new referendum or an understanding. But I guess
No.
that will be the future, more than likely.
I'm a bit
Especially
more
with the
hopeful.
UK in its massive decline. I mean,
Mm.
it's
Oh,
getting
it's
worse and worse
unbelievable. I
there.
can't believe it.
It's
Really.
incredibly dysfunctional.
Who
And
would
the
have thought?
monarchy has just taken hit after hit, and there'll be more
Mm.
revelations of
Mm.
misuse of power, and
Mm.
the terrible things that the powerful do.
Mm. Well, it's like they're
um,
going backwards, really. It's
yeah,
amazing to see.
yeah,
I just can't believe how I think they want to stay. I mean, it's strange for me to say this, or us, as in Aboriginal people, being so old,
yeah,
but it's like they don't want to become modern, and they don't realise that our old system is
mm,
actually it's beyond the thing of old-fashioned and modern. It's just will always be
mm,
current. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
The principles of it, the obligations and the things like that. It can be a really modern forever,
mm,
as in forever,
yeah,
system A. It just amazes me why people can't see this. But yeah, to me, that's it, the decolonization and become truly civilizational. I don't think they're fully understanding of what civilizational is. You can have a civilization, great old ones, I'm talking about too, Egypt, you know, oh, Babylon, that's Iraq now,
mm,
Mesopotamia and all those sort of things. Um, but civilizational is something else. It's
mm,
actually how, humans treat one another and so on and so on. Not necessarily perfectionism or virtue or anything like that, but something about the relational in life.
yeah,
I don't know. They can't seem to escape from the hierarchy, the plan, the structure of the hierarchy. I think they'd be quite lost. They
mm,
wouldn't know how to have a system like that, a
mm,
governance system. But here we are. Do you know what I mean? And there are other old cultures too who just didn't bother with the hierarchy at all. But I couldn't see them. And real modernism would require that a
mm, mm.
complete change, a change in the governance system.
Mm.
completely.
Well, I mean,
Structural, principle, all that kind of
yeah,
stuff. Mm.
we've talked extensively before, Arnie, about like our traditional governance
Mm.
systems that sort of created vast interdependent
Mm.
sort of governance, that prevented invasions, wars, etc.,
Mm. Yeah,
and
no,
made the entire
amazing.
continent lawful,
Yes,
but pluriversal, so many different
yes,
systems of laws and cultures.
yes.
Um, yeah, and what it takes to do that, so,
Mm.
it's kind of, it's making a syndicalized sort
Mm.
of, conglomerate of local governments,
Yeah,
so
that's
you
right.
have,
Yeah.
I mean,
Mm.
it's
Very
there.
good.
We have local
Mm.
governments and,
Mm.
you know, uh,
Mm.
not just, within cities and areas, but then, in the different shires, etc. And
Yeah.
within that, so like we have these intensely local governments and then expanding out
Mm. Mm.
to regional, state, and then,
Mm.
and national government. So, I mean, that's there as an entity. But in terms of having, local governments where people are, where everybody's involved in decision making at the local level,
Mm.
but
Mm.
then those local governments, the extent to which they would be able to be syndicated, with other localities,
Yeah. Yeah.
and sort of then have that kind of collective power,
Mm.
and then also, eventually gradually networking in with all the other local governments to
That's
sort
right.
of
Yeah.
make that,
Mm.
you know, a
Multipolarity.
political reality of the Tyndale map, something that
Yes.
looks
Mm.
like that patchwork quilt,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that would be our preferred future. But, looking at the barriers in the way
Yes.
of getting
Yes.
to that, with that they are
Mm.
many.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We could.
So
Yes. I've been calling it multipolarity.
yeah.
But the only thing is, and I know there's a whole lot of other writers and thinkers about around the world in different countries, including American, English, European, and others. And I think, they think that's the only way that people's different countries' sovereignty, although, I don't care for that as because they invented it, themselves. Um, but you have to respect everybody's sovereignty and so on. So you couldn't just have everybody being like multipolarity, um, equal in a sense. There has to be an actual drawn out system that's there. So no one particular group dominates anybody else and so on and so on. They really are what do you call it? What's that word? Autonomous. They're all autonomous groups. And that is very, but you have to do without a whole lot of things like extractive stuff. Hey, trying to be the toughest tribe on the block or something or other. How could they resist that? They've been living in it for so long, so long.
Well, the way
It'd take time. That's what it'd be taking time to become modern, really. God. Oh.
Hey, well, I guess the sort of redefinition of multipolarity over the last 2 years, and particularly over the last 12 months,
Mm.
has kind of been this developing agreement around the world of a multipolar world,
Mm.
consisting of three or four superpowers that sort of carve the globe up into regions,
Mm.
and that's the multipolarity. And I guess we saw massive moves and trends towards that.
Mm.
Um, but here's where I find hope, Arnie,
Yeah.
is in the asymmetrical warfare
The what?
of the asymmetrical warfare
Oh,
and the
yes,
and the
yes,
rise of that. So the
yes,
little fella is able to completely, thwart a superpower
yes.
and to prevent that kind of that kind of dominance from emerging,
Mm.
which is it's pretty exciting, So
Are
you
you
kind
talking
of.
about Iran? Iran?
Yeah, but
Yes.
on a lot of fronts. So the success of Ukraine, And I mean, they've developed the technologies for drone warfare that's just completely rewritten the entire, military, handbook with regards to strategy, and military technology, So,
Are you
yeah, I
sure it's
think,
Ukraine?
so I think that the development of that drone technology is pretty exciting, in terms of, achieving true multipolarity,
Right.
where everyone can be, where there can be lots of little guys who sort of have to become interdependent, and it's not like mutually assured destruction, but it's the capacity to stop people from invading, and hold off a big guy if they try to invade you from next door.
Oh, you
There's
are.
that potential, but then the problem is,
Right.
of the kind of the treaties and alliances that are formed then, can end up creating, the big, multipolarity, again anyway, with different kinds of alliances. So, like, I don't know if it was underreported, but Ukraine actually attacked an Iranian ship
Yeah.
with drones,
I follow all
recently.
that quite
Yeah,
a
a few days ago. So now that's really interesting, and terrifying, because you're seeing two theaters of war overlapping there. And, so suddenly you've got various, groups of allies who are, you know, having to step in for each other, and those sort of things forming, which potentially, that looks like World War III and the same conditions that gave rise to World War I and World War II. Because the global order that came out of World War I, was about, you know, trying to stop all these, conglomerates of little guys, from, having to be all in if two little guys decided to fight each other. So they established this massive system of nations and great nations. Yeah, under a kind of a broad international order.
Yeah,
So we're moving. Our future is sort of determined by that,
it's a
because
shame.
Australia as being part of Asia and Oceania, what is that going to mean going forward? Um,
Yeah.
because yeah, if it ends up being, great powers and regional, global regional dominance, and multipolarity being, massive players dominating areas of the globe, then we're just going to be, you know,
I don't see
Chinese.
much of
Yeah,
a
we're gonna
future
be
there.
under that Chinese model of governance. So we won't have much choice in that. Um, but yeah,
Well, for
if it
myself,
goes the other
I'm
way,
say, can I say something really, really
then it
terrible
might
here
be
that
different. Yeah.
nobody would agree with it? That I would think that was a very good thing, actually. That a country like China is in charge, actually,
Well,
rather than a country like a monstrous country
yeah,
like America, um, and in conjunction with another monstrous country like Israel, that where they actually all agree that you can just kill and slaughter people into what kind of world that you want to see, I can't imagine. Well, he hasn't talked about it, how wonderful it would be. Z, any of the Chinese leadership or whatever, they don't talk like that. They don't act like that. They don't do anything like that. You know, they want business. That's all. That's all they want to do is business. They don't want to wreck the whole place. And I go with people who don't want to wreck the whole place. That's all. So the very idea of multipolarity being in the hands of only great powers, because that language is Western language. That is the Western language for it. Great powers. We will never do without great powers. And that's as it should be. That's how they say. That's how they, talk. You can read it. You can read what they say. And here he is, Netanyahu, this monster, going over there, meeting with the US president, as if he's an okay guy, he's an okay, oh, well, they're just pals, they're just going over there making further plots, and schemes for the future and so on and so on. And most of the world now most of them can't stand them. They wish they'd disappear, and I don't know how many times I've read and heard of people saying that, let's try and have a back to the civilizational kind of idea, which is what a country like China and Iran and Russia. That Iran, used to be the Persian Empire. It used to be an empire, but they've all got civilizational ways about them. They don't put warring as a kind of mark of superior, better, or anything like that. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. And that's what Australia, if it wants to be a civilizational state, caught, if you want to say it's being trapped by China, I think good for them. You're in luck
Yeah.
if you're trapped by that country. Yes.
Well, the problem of that is a stable path that has a soft landing. Because, I mean, usually these things happen through revolution. Revolution is
Mm.
instigated by young people, led by young people, and
Not always.
so they kick off with a lot of youthful enthusiasm and ideas, but they lack the wisdom as they try to build something. So you end up with a lot of the Asian economies that did this. They became tiger economies. Rapid industrialization, which means completely destroying human populations and the land, non-human populations, for rapid industrial growth. Which is usually followed by a crash and more problems down the track. But you end up with millions of people dying as you have this massive transition. So their sort of genealogy, of governance is coming through that, revolutionary, rise and fall. Yeah, and so that's there. But then all around the world, and I'm including ourselves, Kurds, Kurdish communities, many communities, have that more distributed governance model where, elders have a very important role in governance and provide
Yes.
wisdom and context and, knowledge in that way. And, but, young people also have a very active role in, carrying out all these things and being responsive from day to day. With the adaptive kind of, governance strategies, whereas your older people, it's like young people have adaptive immunity and, old people have that innate immunity
Innate
sort of
immunity.
thing. So there's those stable foundations. So yeah, I would be interested against that backdrop globally and where we're situated, as people who will have to decolonize at some stage
They will
and
have to,
become a
because
republic.
they,
What
will.
sort of governance? Yeah, I don't know. How can we see a path forward to,
They have to.
genuine multi-generational, syndicated, distributed models of governance
Well,
to
first of all, they
become a
have to
genuinely
understand what the
decolonial
difference
republic?
between authority and power is. Authority, you know what I mean? It's exactly what we said to, and at the moment, I don't know if I spoke about it before, the Commonwealth Games. We were having talks with all kinds of authority people, the local government, state government, the games people themselves, and so on. But the police, we had to have a talk with the police too. This is our elders here. We said, look, you have power, but we have authority. The kind of authority that you have is an artificial authority. Your authority is backed up by violence and coercion and things like that. So it's an artificial thing. We know what real authority is, and that's to do with being obligated to behave in certain ways and obligated for a whole range of things and so on. They didn't like that. They didn't like that at all. Every time they use power, coercive and violent power, to say we are the authority, they just immediately shot themselves in the foot, because if they behaved in a different way, they would show that they have real authority. And that's what gerontocracy does. Gerontocracy doesn't have to go around beating people on the head to make them obey, kind of. Even though there's a few bad-tempered ones out there, some of them, but no, they don't behave like that. They know exactly what real authority is, and it's a thing that's demonstrated, not spoken or anything, But
Yeah.
but when they learn that, I reckon, then they'll have a future, Australia. Then they will have a real future.
Well, in our way, elders are revealed and they have a lot of authority. In fact, just, knowledge is the thing that confers authority. But then authority is very different from power,
mm,
and it's also very different from governance.
mm, yeah,
Elders have a lot of ritual authority. Now,
mm,
ritual authority is, that's what's important. So they're,
mm,
respected and revered for that, and they
yes,
carry and keep,
yeah,
the law
yeah,
that,
yeah,
sustains,
mm,
a culture and a community and a land base over time, and that's the
yeah,
governance role. But then where are we going to get our food from today? All these things. How are we going to sort out these problems with this group of young men over here? And,
yeah, yeah,
you know, um, hey, those ones are acting up over there. All those responses are more, distributed governance responses that are, multi-generational.
mm,
Um, yeah, and so I guess the problem is, how do we move towards that
yeah,
in a world, and particularly in this colony where, power and authority are confused,
mm,
are things that are confused, and
mm,
that power is positional,
mm,
when it comes to governance.
mm, mm,
But then power is also, you have market sort of power,
that's
which
it.
supersedes the positional authority of governance, of power and governance.
They run
So
government.
you have your wealth class as
Mm,
being as having a lot of power
mm,
and the capacity to remove regulations
mm,
and to put in place regulations and movements of capital,
mm,
extracted from land and from the
yeah,
people, you know,
yeah,
in increments until we're all just ratcheted up in our misery together.
yeah, so, yeah,
Yeah, so you have all these things. So that's the difficulty, is that power over. And a lot of people talk about the wealth class as, we're always asking the same questions in these things, like, when is it enough?
mm,
How many billions is enough
mm,
money
so
before
true.
you will be satisfied?
Yeah,
But
you
they
will
don't
never be
realize that
satisfied.
nobody
So,
realizes that they're not after the accumulation of more zeros in their bank balance.
mm,
It's not about having more
mm,
in terms of material wealth. It's about having the power to
mm,
walk around and tell people what to do,
yeah, it's the whole
and to
globe.
be
Mm,
able to violate boundaries and law at will
mm,
in your coercion of people.
yeah,
To be able to wield that power in the world.
mm,
And a lot of people are starting to refer to that overlap of the government power, and ruling classes in government and the
yeah, yeah,
ruling
totally.
classes in the wealth classes. They're
Mm,
starting to refer to that as the Epstein class.
yeah, yeah.
And I
I've
think
heard
that's
it
very
lots of
telling,
times.
because
Very telling.
speaks to their real motivations.
That's right. Yeah.
You want to be able to tell people to do things that they don't want to do,
Mm, mm,
that violate consent and all of
mm.
their boundaries, not just
Oh, that's
sexually, but
true.
in every way.
Every different
What's the point of being,
to own people. Yeah.
wealthy and owning a whole, a factory that you own? Um, what's the point of owning that factory
Mm,
if you can't walk in there and say, you, number 26, on working on the rivets.
mm,
Um, yeah, come up here. All right, take off your shirt.
mm.
Hey, take it off or you're fired. There's plenty of people. You know what I mean? You
Yeah, yeah.
need
Mm,
to be able to, um, violate
mm,
people's dignity, and have them comply with it. And I think
mm.
that's the purpose of power, and that's the purpose
Yes,
of wealth
yes, yes,
accumulation as well. So that's tricky. We have to get around them somehow.
yes,
Um,
yes.
and I guess what's happening, if you look at Graeber's work, traditionally you satisfied those people by giving them kind of um, ritual or festival sort of
Mm,
rights,
mm.
you know,
Yeah,
to have privileges and have praise and being weighted on hand and foot and,
yeah.
given these things. Maybe we need to just make these people all into festival kings. And
Yes,
then we all take turns having to go and like rub their
yes.
feet
Entertain themselves.
and let them put their liver spotted hands on us, and we can just take turns, have shifts, have some sort of lottery where we all
Yeah,
have to,
yeah.
like, oh, okay, it's my turn. I got to go up to the big
Yes.
house and let this fella do what he wants. Ugh.
Oh dear. On that rather horrible note, can I
Yeah.
jump in, can I jump in with a couple of questions that we've had that fit perfectly into what you're talking about? And Tyson, I love the way you captured the idea of creating a political reality out of the Tyndale map. And I just very quickly, for anyone on this call who has not been familiar with seeing the Aboriginal map of Australia, it is my obligation to bring it up right now. Where is it? That's not it. There we go. Because we've got a couple of questions about. So, firstly, one question for you, Tyson, is you've mentioned that there are many barriers to creating the kind of multipolarity that Mary is talking about and the kind of vision that you're talking about. And for anyone who knows, Mary and I have been talking for a couple of years about working very slowly on this book that is exploring how you could build an Australian future where the legal system is built on multipolarity and this kind of deeply embedded map. So, Tyson, if I could go to you first, could you maybe outline some of the barriers you see to like the reality of changing the Australian structures? Let's pretend everyone woke up tomorrow wanting to not be a colony, to not be a hierarchy. What could we change to make this kind of system a reality so that we can care for local places and build our resources together? Yeah.
Well, I think the barrier is to, like, where these ideas, this idea of distributed governance and interdependent, networks of local governance, where that sits in the sort of the globalizing kind of Western, Northern Hemisphere sort of orientation of what governance is and what all the possibilities on a stupid spectrum of left to right, where that sits. And this sits way over on the extreme left on that model in, I guess you call it anarcho. They refer to it as anarcho-syndicalism. Is the
Yep.
closest thing we have to what's being proposed there. Now, and I think you see in that other settler colonial superpower there, United States, a very big internal sort of national push towards, well, they've actually classified any of those ideas, that have vaguely anarcho, attached to them, and even just, progressivism, the desire for equality and genuine democracy where everyone has an equal voice. Anything like that has actually become classified as terrorism. And of course, there's, the UN Security Council, everything else has now been, not just approached, but sort of dressed down by Marco Rubio and others with, a push towards, a global response against these ideas as terrorism. That this is actually terrorism, has to be classified as such, and therefore anybody speaking those things can be regarded as supporting terrorists and therefore have no rights and can be jailed without charge indefinitely, etc., etc. You have people at the moment who, for distributing pamphlets, or there's one guy who got 30 years in prison for moving pamphlets about anarcho-syndicalist forms of governance from one house to another house. And so he was,
Crazy.
therefore supporting terrorism, 30 years in prison, and there's a lot of pressure around the world to do this. But yeah, so I'd say that would be a barrier, but you also have, very strong grassroots backlash against this. And I'm not sure people will stand for it. But, we will
Yeah.
end in compromise. Yeah. So
Surely.
I don't know, that those are the barriers. How do you
And
help people
could
to really grasp their kind of local governance power,
yeah.
but then, form interdependencies and, supply chains and, etc.
Thank you, Tyson. And
And sort of
there's
sister council kind of relationships with other localities. I
yeah.
guess, how do you get people doing that, but then also overcoming those larger international political strategic
Pressures.
boundaries
Yeah.
that
And
are forming.
thank you so much. And I'm just going to jump directly to another question from one of our audience. And I'll put this one first to Mary. Mary's, the question is a belief or faith in a shared dreaming necessary for this kind of multipolarity or distributed governance? And may I suggest it speaks to some of the work you've been teaching many folks about, which is relationalism isn't a free-for-all. It's embedded deeply in that sort of space of caring for the living world and caring for each other as part of that. But yeah, what are your thoughts? Is this one of the solutions? I mean, it's a magical solution given the political parameters we're living in and the barriers that Tyson's talked about. But do we need a shared faith in shared core ideas connected to dreaming and dreaming stories,
I
or
don't know
something
about
else?
faith. I don't know about faith because faith always struck me as being something that's difficult. Not just difficult, but because you either have it or you don't. You find it or you've lost it. Very unreliable. It seems to me, faith. You have to have faith to have a belief in something. Whereas it seems to me that our own old system went beyond sort of faith. It's more like this autonomous regard idea. Now you can see it as simply a kind of a spiritual-based diplomacy, something like that. But it really is. You don't have to like people, because that seems to be the crux of a whole lot of problems, human-based problems. How do you get on with people who you don't like and who don't like you? Whether they're neighbors or the way you look or your customs or culture or whatever. How do you get on with that? And I don't know, for all kinds of ways, we probably don't even realise now or whatever, that blackfellas work that out through this kind of autonomous regard. So we're all autonomous beings. We are, everybody is, but not strongly individualist autonomous beings. So you can see the other, and the way of getting to that point of seeing the other is to look after something outside of the self. Yeah, so you put yourself outside of the self by looking after something like that comes first, that is land, and then you know how to look after. It starts to be embedded and instilled. So if you do it for thousands of generations, it's there. You can't even get away from it. But so autonomous regard is for the enemy. It's for the enemy. It's for the person who doesn't you don't like, the neighbor you don't like, the person down the road, the next door neighborly mob, and so and it's nothing. And the amazing thing about it is it's nothing to do with virtue, becoming good, because you will be rewarded in heaven, because there isn't any heaven. This is a system with no God, no autonomous. Deity there standing next to the tree outside. It's just the tree. So the tree, you can say it's like, there's a philosopher called Spinoza. I've gotten into the habit of saying to people who are trying to understand it, and I find it hard to understand, to speak about it myself. Well, how can you, somebody's got to design this and somebody's got to make this and so on and so on. But it's the pure energy itself that gives birth to itself, actually. It just simply came into being. It enters the world. And so we're entered, just like that old lady had said, I'd heard one day, saying, this is talking about her land, her country. This country here grew me up, she said. So it grows up everybody and everything. So because we've been blessed with consciousness, consciousness, that's our choice. We can look after this, what we're surrounded by, the environment, or you can just use it as a capacity to build things, make things, invent technology, blah, blah, blah. But you've got to look after it, because that's the full, complete human being then. That's the human being who is a complete being, autonomous, but complete as in purpose and everything like that.
Mm.
You know,
Well,
so
faith faith
well, faith,
requires
you don't require faith for that. Yeah, sorry, Locke.
faith requires belief without evidence, and
That's
even the
right. Yeah.
rejection of contrary evidence. That's what
That-
faith is, and
That's
that's not what we've ever had.
no,
You know,
no.
so you can, I mean, so what would you need to believe in, like Jehovah or something,
Mm,
you
mm.
know, to truly believe it as an evidence-based thing? It would have to be, there would have, if it's only one God, then he would have to speak to everybody,
Yes,
and
in different languages.
everybody would have to hear the same voice,
Yes.
see the same things, and have the same message. Then you could say, well, that's real.
Mm,
Because that's because
mm.
right across that's evidence. It's
Across
not
the
just
globe.
anecdotal from this one or that one.
Mm,
It's everybody hearing it, and
mm,
and that's what we have. We actually have evidence.
mm,
Our way. Any big complex system, it's self-organizing, and
mm.
constantly there are signals going around in it,
Yeah.
and we can perceive those signals. And when we're in that system, then we perceive our coevolution in real time
Yes.
and the way we're adapting
Yeah.
together and
Yeah.
forming those symbiotic relations, and the land changing, and then the plants working together with us to co-evolve and adapt and
Yeah.
form. Yeah, so you can see these complex systems, and the signals from those is the voice of country for that place, and
Mm,
we all hear it the same way if
mm,
we're
mm,
there locally,
mm,
and we can interact with other localities who
mm,
can tell us what the voice of their country is saying. And then we have a bigger picture of what that voice is.
mm,
And that's where we develop, that's where our law comes
mm.
in all the orbits going out. And so, yeah, I don't think we need faith at all. We need to be able to hear the voice of complex systems. And so
Yes,
that's
that's right.
country,
Yeah.
that's also
It's a good way of putting
economies.
it,
Yeah.
Tyson. Yeah.
So you see economies and markets and things like this, when they're
Mm,
allowed to be self-organizing, they speak, and we can
mm.
all hear the
Can
voice.
hear 'em. Mm.
So there
I
are
hear that voice.
entities,
Yeah.
there are self-organizing intelligent entities that
Mm,
are more than human, and
mm,
they're around us all the time. And
mm.
you do it when you log in and check out the stock prices that morning.
Yes.
You're hearing
Yes.
the voice of a larger entity, and that's evidence-based. You don't
Mm,
need faith.
mm,
Yeah.
mm.
And if we just need to actually listen to
Mm.
these things and make sure the signal isn't perverted
Yeah.
and that the signal isn't altered,
Yeah. Uh,
yeah.
with some trying to explain some of this to some white fellas, I've because it's quite complex, but it's not really complex, I suppose, Aboriginal. But I suggest them read. There's an older philosopher who used to be, in the 1600s, I think, Spinoza. I say just log into your computer and put in Spinoza's God. He is the one for which he got into big trouble. He was a Jewish Dutch, I think, philosopher, and his own mob excommunicated him. The Talmudic kind of system. They chucked him out. But he talks about what some people do mention in passing about, well, God is all around us. He's talking about what's the name? But he explains it in this particular way, which I always thought he came closest to our thing, except we're a real reality, not just an idea in somebody's head. We're a reality for thousands of years. Yes, you don't worship that. It is you don't worship it. It's not a god, so you don't worship it. You look after it, and that's all that's required. Really, when you think of it, it's all that's required. You just look after this thing. So the self is looking after something that is good for the self. So it's the self working via the environment to have this relationship. It's about relationalism between humans, the consciousness, and the environment. So it's there. So you simply have to, don't fall down worshipping things. Just look after it. And it's
Do the way
really, it's incredibly straightforward. That's what I love about the Aboriginal thinking. It's
Yeah.
very straightforward, common sense stuff. No, don't put weighed things on your shoulders. guilt and all kinds of things, and the need for faith and the need for this and the need for that. And no wonder, you read about different novels and so on, this great need for somebody to answer when they talk. When they ask questions and there's no answer, supposedly addressing God, and there's no answer because it isn't there. But you can, like you said, Tyson, you can talk to this out there, this there, nature, it'll answer. It will answer. It's waiting for you to talk.
So Australia's political future involves becoming responsive to the signals of self-organizing systems. It also involves separating, elder authority from executive power, and distributing that. Making sure there are checks on executive power.
Yes, definitely.
Across multiple branches, but also multiple levels of government, to state and local governance, and even communities within those local governments as well, and families, and how they self-organize. And then Auntie Anne's idea of lian, of that self-governance of each person as well. At scale. And I guess, it's just a complex emergent culture that comes from that. But in the sort of biomimicry and, in following the self-organizing patterns of these complex systems that are, that speak in a way that everyone can hear, as long as the signal is separated from the noise of bad actors. Then there is a path through. There is a path through, and I never thought there was until recently. But there's a path through this mess, globally and nationally, and everywhere else in the land. And I see that in the adaptive response to country. Hated having to move to this place that I've thought of as dead for years. But no, it's not dead, and the invasive species are doing things that are really interesting, and that are, seeking collaboration and cooperation. And you can see that adaptive thing where the country is changing. It won't be what it was, but that's good. It will become something. And, the land works on us. And it gives us our governance models, as we go along. Otherwise, it kills us and sort of, selects who is going to govern and how over time.
Can I bring that back then? Because we're sort of out of time, but there's one final question I'm choosing to put to you that someone's asked in the mix there, which is when we talk about, runaway power, someone has said, is this a narcissistic trait? What I'd like to do is firstly put to Mary one of the most powerful quotes of hers. There's so many, of course, but I love that Mary talked about Aboriginal culture as having these self-regulating norms, of course, but in particular, really having communities that controlled each other's ego. I remember you wrote once, Mary, that ego was managed like a volatile substance. And to me, as someone watching the Western world get drunk on its own narcissism through social media and sick leadership, to me, the idea of societies choosing to control some of those more volatile aspects of our capacities for the greater good, I think is one of the greatest challenges in the Western constructs we have today, because everyone feels like they're just out of control doing whatever they want. And the idea of limits and constraint is bad, when in fact, I love the idea of a culture that supports the best of us, not the worst of us. But Mary, would you like to comment on that idea of your culture or communities actually making sure that power and authority was separated, but it was actually through also having personal conduct that didn't go crazy? Did you have any thoughts on that?
No. Oddly enough, no. No, that's exactly as you described it. That's why I thought, to me, I put it down to common sense. I don't know why. I mean, I like the word, I don't mind. Well, everyone likes the word wisdom and so on, but I think of wisdom in a bit like the American system of it. Not system, it's not a system, it's just a saying, I suppose. You wise up. You have experience. You're born, you have experience. And as you're going through life, you wise up. And that's why older people, gerontocracies, worked for all around the world, actually. Everybody did have their own kind of gerontocracy, you know? So I don't know the difference between those two things.
Yeah.
Common sense.
Well, I guess it's a culture
Not
that
to-
listens to the elders. That's the difference. Whereas now we
yeah,
don't.
it could
But
be too.
Tyson, did you
Yeah,
have thoughts on
Tyson,
that?
yeah.
Because it
Oh,
seems to be a
well,
big
I
issue.
guess there's the whole administrative side of governance, which is the most important part for, resource management and everything else, keeping things working. The most boring job ever.
It's boring.
But we only give that job to exciting people. Like, for some reason we have this popularity contest and we put people in charge of, administrations, who are the least qualified to do that. And luckily there is a big sort of, social service sector, in Australia of all these boring people that nobody wants to have sex with, nobody wants to date, nobody wants to see their YouTube channel because they're boring, and, just country bless those people. They're doing the hard job, but that should be something that everybody has to step up and perform that duty and become confident in that. We need to take turns because it sucks to spend your whole life that way. You want to go out and be sexy and interesting and have fun and as well. It sucks that people have to sit in that role their whole life because they know if they left it, the whole thing would fall down. So I guess we need to figure out what administration means, what executive power means, what what is the power that comes with capital and all that sort of thing. And there kind of needs to be some kind of separation of these powers. And we need to have some hygiene of separating administration from all these other things and to truly respect the people who take one for the team and perform those roles. Yeah.
I think that's a
Good one.
fantastic response. Fantastic. But
So
look,
they're fulfilling their relational obligation to the letter and they're carrying it for the rest of us when that needs to be distributed as well,
yes.
And a relational obligation, that's a Maryism.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, look, we might start to wrap it up. I don't want to leave our discussion on the note of just the narcissists. I want to reflect on the fact that, Mary's work, if you are new to Mary's work, please Google her or look at the Future Dreaming website. We've tried to collate as many of her many public speaking videos and articles and emerging books as possible. The relationalist ethos is something that many of us look to as a guide for building a different future. But within that parameters of exactly, I love how Tyson's encapsulated this idea of the future is listening to our self-regulating systems and, doing what Aboriginal people did through millennia of experiment and getting it right, listening to country, building their culture within and around and through the wonder of all those living beings, I think. Something truly exciting. So I would like to, before I let Tyson and Mary say farewell, I'd also like to give a plug for the fact that our next Wajin webinar will be Mary Graham and Morgan Brigg talking about their new book, which is in the Songlines series. And it's a wonderful encapsulation of a lot of Mary's writing connecting through to politics. And it will be the jumping off board for the book that Mary and I are looking at, which is how might we build a relationalist future? It'll just be a lot of questions and some suggestions, but very exciting to think in this way. So enough from me. Huge thank you to everyone for joining us today. And I might just let Mary and Tyson say goodbye or fare thee well in however way they wish.
Yeah. Thank you very much, everybody. Yeah. Thank you. And goodbye and good luck. Happiness.
Thanks, Mary.
All the
Yes,
rest.
good luck. Find that totemic connection because that's where you find your place in the distributed governance of that will emerge and is emerging.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Thank
I love
you.
it. Thank you so much to you both and to everyone for joining us. This recording will be available by next week, and we look forward to seeing you again very soon. Thank you so much, Tyson and Mary, for your wisdom.
Thank you. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
See you, Tyson.